Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm Vinny Costa, editor of Street Muscle Magazine and your host of the RodCAST, the all-encompassing car show where we talk about all things automotive. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Greg Acosta, editor of Engine Labs and the all-around tech guru. What up, Greg?
Hey, it's a good one. I'm excited. Like,
good, man. I'm glad.
They know who's coming, so they know why I'm excited, you know.
Yeah, man. Jeff Smith is back, everyone. Every episode that we have him on is always a great one. You guys seem to love it, so we asked him to return, especially because he has a big announcement. It's already been announced, but here on the RodCAST, Jeff recently launched a new YouTube channel, so we're going to get all into that and talk about what his plans are, what videos they've already made, and just talk about some of the projects he's been working on. So very exciting, Greg.
Yeah, think about it, man. I mean, Jeff has been in the business for how many years? He's at 42 now. 42.
Yeah.
He has literally seen the entire, industry in all of its changes, and he's still adapting.
Yeah, dude. He's just staying right there, with us young bucks and making it happen, which is cool. Because, if you have a collection of, magazines sitting around and you have his words, those aren't going anywhere. But more and more, we're transferring everything digitally. And unfortunately, a lot of those titles that he worked on, you can't find it online, right? And luckily, he still works with us, and you can find a lot of his work on Engine Labs and Street Muscle. So definitely go check that out. But for him to create another avenue to put some really great information out there in a condensed version, in an easily digestible video, it just speaks to his wealth of experience, man. And every time he puts out like one of his tech tips that he's known for, it goes crazy on the magazines. Yeah. And so I imagine his videos will do the same. So before we even get into it, hit pause here, go to Jeff's channel, subscribe, Jeff Smith's Garage. And while you're at it, hit that like, comment, subscribe on our channel as well, and hit that notification button. Hey, everyone, before we jump into this episode, I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsors. This episode was brought to you with the help of Performance Distributors, the company that allows you to feel the difference, not just ignite a spark. What does that mean exactly? Well, their ignition systems are designed and manufactured under the most stringent of guidelines. In fact, the owner, Steve Davis, told us their systems are designed as if they're running them on their own vehicles, and that's because they are. Now, one of the products you may already know them for is their line of DUI distributors, the first and one of the best HEI distributors on the market. Their machine-calibrated timing curves provide instant throttle response and eliminate engine-damaging detonation. Now, for those of you with late model vehicles, their Sultans of Spark ignition coils are based on that same DUI technology, so they too can accommodate a wider plug gap when firing out more voltage. Be sure to check out performancedistributors.com for all your ignition needs. That's performancedistributors.com. All right, Jeff Smith, everyone. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us again, man. This is episode 3 that you've been on, so thank you.
Wow, it's been 3 of them already. Wow. Yeah.
First person to 3.
That's true. So we've had we did a standalone. That first episode we talked about journalistic integrity. That one was really good. People really seemed to like that one. And then the second one you came on with Billy Godbold.
About
that one was low shock technology. Yeah, that was cool. And actually, Billy came back and he talked about even more in depth on that LST cam technology. And now you're back again. This time, I asked you to come back because you've been publishing a bunch of really cool videos on YouTube, and you have your own channel now. So I wanted to have you back on and talk about what's going on with your YouTube channel.
Yeah. So Cam Benty and I should explain who Cam Benty is. Cam Benty and I, way back in 1970, this is going to really date me. CarCraft had a position opening at CarCraft in 1979, and it came down to 2 guys, and it was Cam Benty and I. Now, I did not know this at the time. I discovered it later. So, but his and my careers have done this for the last 40 odd years. And so after I became editor at CarCraft and went to Hot Rod, Cam became editor at CarCraft, but he'd already been the editor of PHR. He actually had, when we were up for the job, he actually had more publishing experience than I did. So when I got my job at CarCraft, one of the first weeks I was visiting down in the photo lab and stuff, and the librarian asked me, her name was Jane Barrett, and she said, says, I don't recognize your name. What did you do before you got here? And I said, I was working at a gas station in Ames, Iowa. So
Nice.
anyway, so Cam and I have been friends forever and ever. And we were actually working together at Acceleration Media, and we started doing these guerrilla videos, just kind of just quickie video things. He was shooting it hand holding his cell phone, and they seemed to work fairly well. So he said, hey, let's try a real product video. What would you like to do? And I said, well, at that time, Edelbrock had just come out with their ABS2 carburetor. So I said, let's do the ABS2. And I did like 10 minutes. And these are not scripted. Cam's line is, he said, he just brings the camera, gets everything all set up. And he says, he just points at me and says, go. And I just talk. And I prepare a little bit ahead of time. I usually put some notes down depending upon what we're going to be dealing with. And then just wind me up and shoot me. I did some tech stuff, some tech tip things on TV for Summit, for for the Power Block people in Nashville. And I said, well, I'll do them as long as you don't have me do a script, because I can't memorize lines. I just have a problem. I can talk all day, but if you have to memorize something, I have difficulty with that. And they said, no scripts. Well, I got there, guess what? And so I learned very quickly that, this big, long script is going to be impossible to read. And they wouldn't give me a teleprompter off camera. I had to memorize the lines. It was awful.
Good Lord.
And they never invited me back.
Well, dude, that's a big
just,
ask for someone who's not used to doing talent work, like as an actor, right? Like I've done talent work at Power Automedia, and thankfully they let us use a prompter because you can't. It's so difficult to memorize lines, and then it just seems unnatural.
Yeah. So anyway, we just set this up and we did this ABS2 carburetor deal, and I don't quite know how that worked, but Cam posted it, and I think that Edelbrock, I'm just assuming this is what they did. They just said, hey, if you want a sort of a third person recommendation on this thing or evaluation on it, watch that video. And this thing ended up with 4,000 or 5,000 views, 7,000 views, something like a crazy number. But it wasn't on something that we at that time called Just Miss Garage. It was just on Cam Bente's YouTube channel. So we decided to do this. And so then we created the Just Miss Garage. And I had one of my old staff member buddies, when I was at CarCraft, he has a company called Fine Line Creations. And he did a little banner for us. And Greg Smith, who was an ex-art director at Peterson, did my logo for me. And it's been a lot of fun. So we've done, I think, 5 or 6 right now, something like that.
I gotta ask, Jeff, why do you only have that one song that's techno? I love that one. Like that one song that's different. I love that song. I want more of those.
Okay, well, I'll have to ask Cam. He does all the production side, so I'm just the talking head, and then he does literally everything else. So he brings the cameras, he sets everything up, and then just winds me up, and we take off. And
where are you guys shooting this thing, Jeff?
In my garage here at the shop.
Jeff Smith's garage.
Garage.
No movie magic. That's like legitimately where it is.
We're actually thinking about doing a neon sign, because I could get one built for about $500-600, which might be kind of fun.
That'd be awesome, man. I dig the logo.
Difficult, but
you guys have done 7 videos so far. It looks like all of them, different like textile tips. And I want to get into some of them. But before I do, I got to ask, because I've always wondered this, and I've never really looked into it for myself, just because their product offerings are so just deep. That ABS2, how's it different from their Performance series?
The fundamental difference in the ABS2 is an annular booster on the primary side. So
okay.
Kurt Hooker he just retired, I think, 1.5 years, 2 years ago. Been there almost 50 years. He started when he was 16. And one of the things he essentially ran the dyno facility at Edelbrock. So any dyno testing that they did, Kurt and Robert Young, who is still there, they ran the dyno. And over the years, he saw how well angular discharge booster carburetors worked, especially down low for street carburetors. So he just said, we should build one of these. So he built a booster just for their standard AVS carburetor, threw it on there, played around with it on probably not even on the dyno. He probably did it in the car and messed around with it with an O2 sensor, got the air fuel ratios. So he had a whole nother package of metering rods and jets. And I was down there one day, this was several years ago, and he goes, "Hey, jump in that truck over there and drive it. Tell me what you think." I'd never even seen this truck before. It was some small block Chevy, like mid-70s pickup truck. Jumped in it, and the first thing you noticed was the thing had near instantaneous throttle response. And it was like, came back and I said, well, it feels like it's got a much bigger motor in it than it really. I said, it's probably what, just a base 350? He goes, yeah, it's a crate motor. And I said, so what makes it so snappy? And he goes, well, it's the carburetor that this booster that I designed. Initially, they were going to build and sell just the booster. And then they realized that won't make you very much money, but if you sell another carburetor, it will. So they just basically changed the booster, and then changed the mixture, because booster, they're so much more sensitive. So you essentially you pull fuel out of it. You run much smaller jet and a much smaller, or actually larger metering rod, lean it out because the booster is so much more responsive. We did a test one time, long time ago, out at Duttweiler's on annular booster carburetors. It's when Barry Grant was still in business, and he had I should redo this test because it was really a lot of fun. We took I can't remember now, big block Chevy probably, on a single plane manifold, and put like a 750 carburetor on it. A standard drop leg booster carburetor. And then we did it at Kenny's because we could pull the motor down at wide open throttle at like 1,000 RPM. And the engine was not happy down there. 1,000 RPM wide open throttle is just, it sounds like an angry tractor motor, right? And
yeah, just lugging.
You're just lugging like crazy. And I took my camera and stuck it out over the top of the carburetor, standing next to the engine, and did some flash photos of what the fuel looked like coming out of the booster. And essentially it was coming out in these big globs of fuel, this big clumps of fuel. If you shot it without the flash, it would just look like a stream. But if you pour water out of a jar or anything and flash it, it's not a stream, it's a series of drops. And that's what it looked like coming out of the booster, except they were all different sizes. Then we took that carburetor off and put on a same size carburetor. The only difference in those two carburetors was the jetting and the angular boosters. And this was an angular booster carburetor. And the motor instantly sounded better. The torque picked up 90 foot-pounds of torque. And when we took pictures of it, there's these nice, tiny little droplets of fuel coming out of the booster. Because instead of having one large hole, you need to have a ring with like 8 or 10 small holes. So the fuel coming out of there by design is going to be smaller to begin with. And
so you have that same amount of fuel, but it's just dispersed over a larger area.
Yeah, because I think, well, it was hard you couldn't really tell from air fuel ratio because, but likely it would look fat with the drop leg booster. Now, no one drives at 1,000 RPM at wide open throttle, right?
I should hope not.
Yeah, it's really not good for the motor. But the point is that at part throttle, it's going to be responsive. It's going to accept throttle better. And I've got a buddy of mine that has a 434 all aluminum small block in a 71 Camaro autocross car. And he went out and bought one of those carburetors. He swears by it. And because it picks up the throttle off the corner quicker, it's just more responsive. So
do they still use the same body as like a 1406 or 1405?
Yeah, it's essentially the same carburetor. Now, so I've had a couple of people say, well, can I just buy the booster? And it's like, no, they won't sell it to you. So it's going to force you to buy a carburetor, but it works so nice that, it might be worthwhile. Would I recommend that you go out and buy one if you already have an AVS? No, because I don't think that unless you can find someone to buy yours for what you're going to buy the AVS 2 for, but what are the chances of that? So, but
I think the price disparity is not that big, right?
The Edelbrocks they're not that expensive. I think it's a $400 carburetor. It's not that expensive, especially if you buy the non-electric choke version. That's just a standard performance one. But it's a great little carburetor especially for like small displacement motors. I just got done finished building a 283. It's a dumb project I never should have taken on, but I did it, and it was partly to get it out of here, but also just because it's like I like those little motors, and so I just put, it's not an AVS, but it's a standard Edelbrock on there, and they're snappy down low. And if I put an AVS2 on, it would feel like a bigger engine. And that's kind of the idea,
I may have to try that.
It almost feels like, I've had people tell me that it feels like fuel injection, and that's the thing with any carburetor, not just that carburetor, but if you tune it properly, you get the idle circuit set up properly, and you get the accelerator pump circuit set up properly, which means most people think, well, just throw more fuel at it, it'll be fine. Well, it actually deadens it. It actually softens the motor. So it will actually be crisper if you give it only what it needs and not any more. So
I wonder how it would react if you ran it in conjunction with that K&N supplemental fuel injection that you did an article on a while back for us. You remember that?
Yeah. That I think the advantage to that thing really is cold start. So you take a 4150 carburetor mode, the HP style without the choke on it and everything. And if you get those carburetors set up properly to idle mixture when they're fully warmed up, they won't run when they're cold. So whenever I get someone that says, hey, I want to tune my carburetor, the first thing I ask them is, they say, it's pretty close now. I said, okay, so when it's, ambient temperature, 70 degrees outside, you go out, hit the throttle once, turn the key, the motor starts, will it idle by itself when it's cold? Oh yeah. I said, then it's too rich. Because it shouldn't.
Right, yeah.
The leaner I can get it to run when it's fully warmed up, the worse it's going to run when it's cold. And I had some friends from San Diego, all three carbureted big block guys. And this was several years ago. We had what we called Carburation Day, and I drove down to San Diego. Actually, they came up here, and because it was an excuse to come up and hang out for a day. We did Carburation Day, and I put my O2 sensor. I had them put O2 sensor bung in each of their exhaust pipes, right after the headers, and then drive each car around and evaluate what it's doing, bring it back, take it apart, and modify. So we were doing round robin. So while one guy was working on his carburetor, I had another car driving around, and we just round robined them. We spent a whole day doing that. And they were thrilled with the way they ran when it was warm. But all three of them said, we hate it when it's cold, because none of them had choke. They said, we have to sit here and play with this thing for maybe 5 minutes, before it'll run by itself. And I went, yeah, pretty much. Sorry.
That's wild.
About trade-offs.
Yeah.
Have you done anything with, so you did your third video on Jeff Smith's garage. I have it pulled up right here. You talk about the AVS2 carburetor.
Yeah. So we did that one. In fact, I thought about doing like, I don't know how to really set the idle mixer screws. I have a friend of mine introduced me to a guy who makes a 5-gas analyzer, and it's a really nice machine. I loaned it to a friend of mine. I need to get it back before he thinks it belongs to him. And but it's really nice for looking at messing with idle mixture screws and getting it to run as cleanly as possible. It's not necessarily from an emission standpoint, that is, to just make it idle as clean as possible, and it's crisper. And you essentially are looking at keeping your carbon dioxide numbers really high, your carbon monoxide numbers relatively low, and your NOx relatively low, and balancing those components, because essentially what you're trying to do is to achieve complete combustion. With big camshafts and stuff, you're never going to get there. HC numbers are going to be high. It's just inevitable, because with valve overlap, you got both the intake and exhaust valve open at the same time. That fuel's just going to go like that right out the exhaust pipe. So your HC numbers are always going to be high, but you try and balance, and ignition timing as well has a big effect on all that stuff too. So you throw more timing in it to make it idle cleaner, and it runs better, but you watch the AC numbers just go like this. They just go way up. So you're trying to balance all that stuff to make it decent. But
You did an
essentially
article on
with
that
CO,
for us, didn't you?
and CO2, it's a balance.
Jeff, you did an article on the 5-gas analyzer for Engine Labs for us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That wasn't so much like how to tune with it, but what it could do, right?
What it could do, yes. And the whole idea was to say, here's a way to evaluate the techniques. And what I learned was just that, so like I describe it this way: the slot that's in the idle mixture screw on a Holley carburetor, I don't know how thick that is. I don't know, maybe it's 3/32 of an inch thick. I've found that even on a 2 idle circuit Holley carburetor, making it change that width, the width of that slot, you can see the air fuel ratio jump and change. And the HC numbers change, the CO numbers change, the CO2 numbers change, just that much. And I'll see people just adjust, crank it over a half a turn. It's like, oh my God, no, you balance them out, get them balanced left to right side first, start there, and then make the same change on both sides and make them very slight changes. And then watch your vacuum gauge, because vacuum and tack, and then get the highest vacuum you can, and then lean it just the width of that slot slightly. That'll lean it out a little bit, and that'll be about the best you're going to get, but it takes some time. I've spent 20 minutes setting idle mixture on an engine.
Jeff, we were talking off camera about how you're starting to put these videos together, and they're awesome because they're like a condensed version of a lot of articles that you've done over the years.
Uh-huh.
And you said that you've been doing it for 30 years, putting these tech tips together. How do you gain inspiration? And then, how did you start to develop your videos? How did you know which ones that you wanted to make into videos?
Originally, I would go to shops and say, you work on these race engines all day long, so give me a tech tip. And they look at you like you just said, the world is flat. And it's like they just zone out, because and what I learned was that it's the application of something. So what I would do is I would say, well, what are you working on right now? And then they would say, so how do you do that? They're talking about some process. And then, or like use an example, say, well, when you're degreeing a camshaft, what lifter do you use? Oh, well, I got this little technique. That's what I'm looking for. The little technique that they've just learned over the years. Or like, a lot of the tech tips sometimes are like homemade tools, because when I first started doing this stuff, a lot of the tools that now you can buy, nobody made them back then. That's, because I'm prehistoric, so you had to make them. I mean, nobody actually made, I think somebody was probably making some kind of a pre-oiler for a small block Chevy, for example, but I just made one out of a distributor, and I use it to this day, because some of the aftermarket ones don't work. I tried one the other day, and it was like, on a small block and big block Chevy, when you put the distributor housing in the body, if you look at the body, there's a channel cut into the body of the distributor. Well, that's the crossover link from the driver's side to the passenger side hydraulic lifter circuit for the circuit for the hydraulic lifters. That's the main circuit, because it goes past the lifters and then down to the mains. Well, if you try and pressure lube the motor without the lifter or without the distributor body in there, it's only gonna lube the left side of the engine. It'll never lube the right side. Or if that channel's too small or it's in the wrong place, it won't do it. So people say, why are you using that old tool when you got 3 other ones that are, it's like, well, because I know this works.
So I think we learned from the Engine Performance Expo and John Kazi, the old homemade tools are sometimes the best.
Oh yeah. Did you watch that thing? That was fantastic. Right off the bat, the little tool he made with the clamp to pull out studs. It was like, oh my God, that's simple.
It was just channel locks with some threaded bar stock.
Bar stock. Yep. He threaded the bar stock, then split it down the middle, and then made it thinner so that when you clamped it, and then with the threads on it, that it would squeeze the stud and then just unscrew it. And it was brilliant. And that's why I love John Kazi, because I mean, he's he thinks all the time, and it's like the rest of us just double nut it, and you spend a half an hour doing that, to get 3 studs out of an engine, and you think, but when he does it every day, then that's why he makes the tools. And I watched that whole video, and I have like 3 pages of notes of stuff that I want to.
Yeah, well, like when I saw his cam bearing things, I was like, I want to make those. I don't want to use my universal tool ever again. Why didn't I think of this?
Right. Yeah. And they're so simple. And those are the absolutely the best ones, are the simplest ones, and the ones you use the most often, So I mean, something like the little equation that Steve Brule from West Tech taught me. So here's a little not for that West Tech right there. So on how to calculate horsepower, because we would go out there, I'd bring trundle my motor out there, and so okay, this is a I don't know, it's a 355 small block Chevy. It's got this cam, this head, blah blah blah. What do you think it's going to make? And I'd guess a number, and he'd guess a number, and his number would be within like 3 horsepower of what I would make. And it's like, after about the 10th time this happened, like, all right, what's going on here? And he goes, okay, I'm gonna let you into my little secret. And what he does, and if you think about it, it's simple. So he said, this is the equation for like a your typical street engine, 9.5, 10-to-1 compression, decent heads, decent camshaft. So you take displacement. I think we did this story for you guys. Displacement times 1.25, which is 1.25 pound-feet per cubic inch. So you multiply 355 times 1.25. Let me get my calculator right now. Let's run through this. 355 times 1.25. So that's 444 foot-pounds of torque. And then he said, over the years, he's seen that between peak torque and peak horsepower, the engine typically will lose 10% power. So you multiply it. So let's round that off and say 444 times 0.9. So we're going to take off 44.4 foot-pounds from that. Okay, 399.6. Round that off to 400. Now that's the torque at peak horsepower. Now here comes the judgment call. Based on camshaft, where do you suppose peak horsepower is going to lie? So let's just use 6,000. So 6,000, multiply that, and then it's just simple horsepower equation. Torque times RPM divided by 5252. So you take the torque, 400, times the 6,000 RPM divided by 5252. We got ourselves 457 horsepower.
I mean, and that's basically like simplified BMAP, right?
Yes. Yeah. And what he's doing is he's saying, so then if your engine's got a lot more compression, bigger heads, and it's a more gnarly engine, I'll just pump that 1.25 up to 1.3, 1.35. I've got some LS motors that do 1.44. Holy crap, this is really good. These are still street motors. And so one day I was talking to Kazi, and I know what it was. It was the story about the Jessel engine that I did for you guys for Engine Lab. And he just gave me a horsepower number that he was shooting at 11, what was it, 11 or 12,000 RPM. It was crazy.
I think it was like 11.8 or something.
Yeah. So let's just say it was 12,000. So I worked the equation backwards to come up with a torque per cubic inch number, and then ran through I basically did, because I'm not that smart with math. So I just kept plugging numbers in. So I got the horsepower number I wanted at 12,000 RPM. And it turned out to be something like I'm going to say it was 1.48. Okay. And I was talking to Kazi later about something completely different, and I mentioned it. And he said, oh, I know what it was. He and I were talking about that engine. He goes, yeah, his horsepower number is low. I said, okay. He goes, because I'll bet you, because that was purely built to go to Bonneville, which means it was going to be a 14-to-1 compression motor. And I think, let's say it was 1.48 pound-feet per cubic inch for the torque capacity. And he said, Engine Master motors where they have to run on 100 octane gas are 1.55. The good ones are between 1.52 and 1.55. So that instantly became the goal, was to try and get to a 1.5. I haven't ever got there yet, but it'd be fun to get there. And then you start thinking about stuff like, and this is all fodder for Just Miss Garage, depending upon which way. So I'm going to kind of bring this back to what we originally started talking about. But what do the readers want? So like it looked like at first that they wanted the simpler stuff, but then just recently, now the trend has gone back to, I think how to set your valve lash, that was the one with the biggest numbers. So we'll see. I mean, it may change, it may evolve, but things like that are really, to me, are really interesting, and I'll bet I use that equation every day. Because somebody say, well, how much power do you think it'll make? Well, let's find out. Boom, 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 boom. Here we go.
I'm not going to lie. I've been using it for the LS 5.0 thing. Just to make sure I'm not getting my expectations too far out there.
Right.
And everything I keep doing, whether it's computer simulations, the BMAP stuff, or that calculation, is saying I'm well within reality.
Yeah.
But it just feels like the goal I have is not. You know what I mean? But it's awesome because math doesn't lie.
Right.
What is that called, Greg? BMAP?
BMAP, break mean effective pressure.
Yeah. BMEP.
That's actually what was used. Jeff, I don't remember if you jumped in on that or whether you handed that off to somebody else. The C8 Corvette dyno numbers when they came out.
Yes.
When everybody was calling BS, that BMAP was.
The guy who really kind of pulled the curtain back on that whole deal was Billy Godbolt. I saw a Facebook post where he goes,
yes,
well, I don't know where they got these numbers, but if that engine's here's what the BMEP numbers would have to be in order for that engine to make that power. And quite frankly, he stopped short of saying it's impossible. He did the Billy version, the political saying, if that in fact is true, they have an outstanding engine that is leagues ahead of everyone else, which of course that just wasn't possible. Yeah. And they finally did figure out what they did wrong. But the sad part is that, how did those guys get that easily fooled? That was the part I didn't understand, because somebody should have said, I don't think this is right. And before we jump in and go, oh my God, it makes all this power, it's like, maybe talk to someone,
Well, and that's the thing. I mean,
Weiler would have gone, you guys are way off base. There's something wrong.
Yeah, I'm not going to throw, throw shade on them. They did what they did, and I mean, they're respected people. But I mean, we've had the same situation where I've had people in our editorial group come to me and go, "This sounds hinky. Does it work?" And of course, this is after the Corvette thing. So of course, I start running it through all the calculations, and I'm like, no, that doesn't work. So we go back and then we come to find out that this person that is trying to sell them something.
Yeah.
So we end up not running the store.
And if the people that are watching this, if they want an explanation of BMEP, I did a story for you on the numbers behind the dynos. So in other words, if you look beyond just the horsepower and the torque numbers, the dyno sheet will give you all these other numbers. And then we went through what each of those are. And BMEP is, I forget, there's a multiplier for it, and I forget what it is. But you take the displacement and do the multiplier, and it'll give you brake mean effective pressure, mean being average. So this is your average effective pressure on the piston. And so if you take that same pressure and put it on a smaller piston, it's going to make less power. If you put it on a bigger piston, because you have greater surface area, you have the same pressure pushing on a bigger piston, guess what? It's going to make more torque.
Yeah, and it's funny because Jason Fensky of Engineering Explained, he uses it, but he uses it in the metric side, so it's in bar. So the numbers don't equate at all. But for some reason, my brain has remembered all the metric averages. So whenever I'm doing something, I have to put it in a metric so that I can compare it against the things that I've done with him.
Right.
That's what my brain thinks in, and it sucks because that's the only metric thing that I think in ever, period.
Right. Well, and that you get into that with inches of mercury versus bar on a fuel injection map, and people get really confused. And you have to remember that 100 kPa is essentially atmospheric pressure. So 100 kPa at sea level would be 14.7.
Yeah.
And then so 50% of that would be basically half throttle if you want.
Yeah. And then you get into the whole fact that bar is 14.5, not 14.7.
Right.
Confuse everybody. Oh, I hated that in college.
You can easily go down the rabbit hole. It's fun, but you oftentimes it's not necessarily what you're trying to do.
Yeah. But I mean, it's that BMAP ever since Billy did that. And then we did the article, with you on all the other numbers. And that has been I wish more people would embrace it.
Yeah. Well, and the whole point of that story really was to say, there are a whole bunch of other numbers here. Brake specific fuel consumption, you know, I always go right there because I learned that from Jim McFarland way back in the early 80s. And because I was like, what is this number here? And well, it's related to engine efficiency. And it's interesting how over the years that number keeps coming down, you know. Now, like at Westech, for example, we might have a brake specific number in the really low 4s. Likely it's probably really not that good because there's oftentimes a delay in their fuel counter relative to where the engine is. So the fuel kind of pumps a little bit behind it. So that number is lower, therefore it looks more efficient. So, but you know, in order to get a super accurate number, you might have to spend $50,000 for a flow meter that has instantaneously reactive. And they can't afford to do that. There's no reason to do that because it's not a specific number you're shooting for. But it's fun still, and it gives you some equations. So if you build 2 engines and the second one they're supposed to be identical, but you made a couple of minor changes, and maybe the power comes up or maybe it doesn't. But if the brake specific is better, it's like, wow, okay, well I gained some efficiency somewhere, you know.
Yeah, well, it's really cool to see like turbo engines and just forced induction in general. I mean, it used to be you would just, if you were just off the top of your head, it was 0.65.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, that's insane nowadays.
Yeah.
That would have to be such a like sloppy, inefficient engine.
Right.
It's almost criminal to use that number anymore.
And then also you have to remember that on a positive displacement supercharger or centrifugal, anything that's engine driven, you have to consider that the brake specific number is going to be higher because you're taking power to drive that blower. That requires fuel. You know, the brake specific number is reflecting that. That's why those numbers are always higher. And I get people. I in fact, it was a story I did for you on I can't remember what the topic was, but I casually mentioned that, you know, centrifugal superchargers eat a lot of power. You know, they're better than the Roots blowers in terms of power efficiency, but they still eat a lot of power. And, you know, Vortec told me they've got some race blowers that will eat 900 horsepower. Yeah. It takes 900 to drive them, you know.
Holy hellfire.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a 3,000, 3,500 horsepower engine.
Yeah.
You know, but it takes 900.
Look at the size of them.
And it takes 900 horsepower worth of fuel in order to make, so that's reflected in the brake specific numbers.
Well, I mean, think about you know, the non-automotive side of like Vortec and ProCharger, the industrial air moving.
Yeah.
And they to move some of those big blowers, they have big blocks.
Oh yeah.
They sit there and run just to turn the blower.
Yes.
That's the only job. Like,
yes.
Like, yeah.
I did a story on top fuel engines a long time ago, and I talked to Bill Miller Engineering, and they were telling me that they were using big block Chevys to try it. Well, it'd be more than that. They were having to run alcohol engines to drive a supercharger, try and figure out how much power they ate. Oof. But it was in the thousands, you know.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Because it takes power to move that air.
You guys there's a couple of while you guys were talking way above my head, I was looking at some videos on your channel, and you have your favorite LS engine combinations and then your big block engine combinations. Can we expect to see like a series there, like your favorite combos?
Small block Chevys and that, and we could come back and do them several different ways. Those were just my favorites. Like the LS, for example, was a series I did for CarCraft on a junkyard 6-liter, and I don't know how many combinations we tested. It was dozens. I mean, I think I was on the dyno 4 times, and it was 2 days each time, and it was just a crazy amount of different combinations. And the peak power combination was fun, but it didn't really get my attention. What got my attention was an accidental combination where we took a set of 5.3, we took the 6-liter heads off, put a set of ported 5.3 heads on. And we did that to get the combustion chamber space down so the compression would come up. So we added like 3/4 of a ratio of compression to it, and ran a small 219 at 50, which has become my favorite LS camshaft for the street. 219 at 50, 226. It's around 600 lift. It's a pretty aggressive little cam, but it idles even in a 4.8. I've got that camshaft in a 4.8, and it'll sit there and idle really at about 12 or 13 inches of manifold vacuum, you know, because it's
That's
not
awesome.
that big, but it's got a lot of lift, and LS engines love lift. And so that combined with, from a budget standpoint, combined with the Trailblazer SS intake manifold that you could buy from Rock Auto for $200. That combination, 6-liter with the camshaft, the ported 5.3 heads, and the intake manifold made almost 500 horsepower. I was shocked.
How awesome is that?
We were throwing parts of this thing and pulling the handle and changing stuff. And then later I went back and evaluated my numbers and went, oh my God, this thing made 495 at 6,000 RPM. It was like,
that's crazy.
I mean, it looks like a truck motor. It, you know, because, and if people were to look at it, they go, well, this is a nothing motor. It's got 5.3 heads on it. That can't work. But they're ported 5.3 heads, West Coast Racing cylinder heads. My friends over here at West Coast Racing, they're right by the Van Nuys Airport, and they take a 5.3 head and they take the 189 valve out of it and open the seat up to a 2-inch. So in essence, you get an LS1, LS6 intake valve size. They keep the stock exhaust valve and pocket just the inside pocket area, which is where you get 90% of your flow. People think, oh, it's up by the port match. It's like, no, it's a waste of time. Don't bother up there. And you look on his porting, and there's one little touch where the tool just hits it. It doesn't really need to, probably. And I think he charges like $1,000 for that package. But you put a good set of springs on it, it'll work really well on a 5.3, but especially even on a 6-liter. It really helps. So, and that was just a fun combination that we stumbled onto that. And then on small blocks in the old days when we were doing flat tappet camshafts, it was a 268 Extreme Energy flat tappet camshaft, dual plane intake manifold on 355. I don't know how many engines we built like that. Every time we built like 420, something like that, 425, which back in the day, nowadays, that's nothing, but back then that was a pretty respectable motor. It idled decently. It was easy to tune. It responded to changes that you made. It's a nice little motor. Now you go back and do it up. You run the compression up a little higher, trying to get those things up around 10-to-1 with better cylinder heads and better combustion chambers now, and a hydraulic roller. Put it in a one-piece remain seal. I'm giving all my stuff away, but you put it on a one-piece remain seal small block, so that accepts a roller camshaft, so you don't have to do the retrofit stuff. It's expensive, and it's easy little motor to make. With a roller, it would probably make 440. So
you say you put that 220 in a 4.8?
Yeah, we put that 219 at 50 camshaft in a 4.8 motor, and it made 430 horsepower. Now the 4.8 is 293 inches. It's tiny.
Yeah. And
that all happened quite by accident, but we put a 4.8 motor. It was supposed to be a 5.3. I went out and bought a used 5.3. The guy lied to me. I got it home, pulled it out, like, this is not a 5.3, it's a 4.8. And so, okay, well, we did a little story on the cheapest possible LS swap into like a early Camaro or Chevelle. And we dropped that motor in, took it out, drove it, and it was a dog. It drove like a 283 down low, no torque, no displacement, but you got that motor up above 3,000, man, it just took off. And I'm thinking, so we took it to Irwindale over here, the 8th mile. And it had a 355 gear in it, 26-inch tall tire, and a really tight converter. Converter was so tight that later I tried to trigger the nitrous at 1,800 RPM. I set my RPM trigger to start the nitrous at 1,800, and you'd match the throttle and nothing would happen for about a second. And all of a sudden, boom, and it would take off. And I thought, and I'm watching my data log, RPM comes up and the nitrous stays off. And all of a sudden, about a second in it, boom, it takes off. And I'm thinking, what's this? What's this phantom delay? Then it dawned on me. I literally looked at the RPM trace. The stall was like 1,700. The converter was so tight that it just nothing happened, right? So I made the nitrous come on at 1,500, and then you hit the throttle and it would hit, and then the thing took off. So we ran the thing, and in the nitrous 150 shot, I had my 3,600 pound Chevelle running a quarter mile equivalent of 1140s. at 120 miles an hour from a
Damn.
4.8. And that was
crazy.
I love the
anything?
4.8s.
Did you port those heads too?
And people give them to you because nobody wants them. You know, they're a tiny little...
tell me that after I had to like hunt all over in Arizona, the cheapest 4.8 I could find was $650.
Really? Yeah, because my buddy in Iowa, he says he gets them all the time. He says people just give them to him.
Because the reason I asked about that specifically, Jeff, is because
they're not big. So, but yeah,
no,
it's all because the cylinder heads are so good. Because I can remember building a 283 back in the day, and was thrilled to make 275 horsepower. And I got this 4.8 making 360, you know, or I'm sorry, 430. 430, you know.
That was stock, or were those ported too?
That was with the ported heads and the 219 camshaft. With stock heads, it probably would have knocked 20 off it. So it would have made, probably would have made 400.
That's still pretty damn good.
Yeah. Motor. And all you're doing is screwing a camshaft in and putting valve springs on it. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
And it's because the cylinder heads are so good, you know, and the smaller you make the engine, the more efficient those heads become, you know.
Now, did you put that in the Chevelle that you published a video about, your 66?
Yeah.
Or was that a different one?
The orange, that was in the orange car. This was a long time ago. It was probably 5 years ago. Then later we put a supercharger on it, put a centrifugal supercharger on it. And that thing with those same heads and that same camshaft, we didn't change the cam, we didn't put a blower camshaft. We left that camshaft in it, and it made 630.
Yeah.
Now I
That's
never,
awesome.
We had the blower motor in the car, got it all done, and then, as what usually happens around here, then the project went this way, and you know, I never got a chance to run the car at the track. So
that's like a 48% power gain.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's a tiny little motor, and so what it does is, you know, it just puts boost to it, which essentially, so I think it was running about 10 pounds of boost. If you considered it at 7 pounds of boost, that's essentially a 50% gain in displacement, because it's, you know, 14 psi, 15 psi would be a 100% gain in displacement from normally aspirated. That's one way you can look at it. It's really not that, because you have to subtract out the power that blower is driving, and probably even that little tiny blower still eating 40, 45, 50 horsepower.
Wow.
You know? So that means the engine's really making at 630 on the engine dyno, it was really making close to 700 horsepower. But then you have to subtract out the shaft power. So in other words, if we could drive the blower with something else, you know, another engine at 70 horsepower, and then using that blower which is essentially what you do with a turbocharger, there you go.
Get one of those little Predator 212s in there, just pull start it.
Yeah.
But that's pretty cool. So can we?
Yeah. So we never took it to the track. My guess is it would have run about the same as the nitrous motor with the same displacement. So it would have run 1150s, 120 miles an hour, which is, for a tiny little motor, you just push you back in the seat. The nitrous, that's what's great about the nitrous. Boy, just push you back in the seat. It felt like a little big block, is what it felt like. You know,
that's cooking.
It's like, this is a tiny little junkyard motor that I have. You know, somebody asked me one time, how much you got this whole motor? I said, well, if you subtract out the camshaft, the cylinder heads, and the intake manifold, the carburetor, and the nitrous, take those pieces out of it, I have nothing in this. I have like $200 invested. And that's what guys do. You know, it's grenade. We'll just go buy another one. You know, it's cheap.
Well, that's kind of like your original Mighty Mouse build, no?
Yeah, very similar kind of stuff. So, you know, you just don't want to hit them too hard. But yeah, we've done a lot of stuff over the years, and it's run really, really well. You know, so you just don't go too big with a camshaft. Don't go too much on anything, and you know, a study in being conservative, and it works. You know.
Are we going to see more on your Chevelle, Jeff?
Pardon me?
Are we going to see more on your Chevelle on the YouTube channel?
Yeah, it's actually outside right now because we've got another car in here, and then in the shop right now is also the chassis for my high school car. So that one of the videos on there is, which we need to update. I spent 4 hours beating on headers to make them fit the chassis. And so I've now got, it's actually not my original engine. I've got a friend of mine's big block that I built for him that I need to go deliver, but I used it to drop in the chassis, make the headers fit, and orient everything else, and get my shifter set up and everything else. So I'm building the entire chassis for my high school car. And then the body's over at Pete Santini's shop being painted. It's been there for 5 years. So hopefully in the next couple of months, we're going to get paint on it. And then we have to go down there, drop the body on the chassis, bring it up here, and then start screwing it together. So I bought that car. It's a 360 horse, 4-speed Chevelle in 1971, August of 1971. And it's finally coming back. It's been apart for over 20 years. It's been literally in pieces for over 20, almost 25 years. We did a story in Chevy High when I was the editor, I think no, it wasn't 25 years, probably 22 years, 20 years, probably year 2000. And a bunch of friends come over and we disassembled the entire car in one morning. There were like 6 of us and completely disassembled the car in like 6 hours. Only now starting to come back together.
So that big block that's going in there, is that the same as your favorite engine combo? That video that you guys just published?
It's 396. So actually what I did was I built this engine a long time ago, basically to replicate the engine that was in it when I had it in high school. So it's essentially a reproduction 360 horse camshaft, hydraulic flat tappet camshaft, oval port heads, and a dual plane intake manifold. So it's really mild little motor. It doesn't even make 400 horsepower. It only makes like 375. But it's a real mild camshaft, and this is just going to be a driver because I put a 273 gear in it so we could actually drive it on the highway though.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
very cool. You remember what you gave for that thing back in what you said, 71?
Yeah, 1971.
Yeah. You remember what you gave for it back then?
$850.
Almost as much as that 4.8 that you paid for, Greg.
When you're working for $1.75 an hour, that's a lot of money, Yeah. I was bringing home, let's see. I was in high school, 30 hours at $1.75. I was bringing home $50 a week.
Well, hold on. Let me look up the inflation calculator.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah, I still think that's a way better deal than you can get now. Yeah. Okay. So that was equal to almost $5,500. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great story. I don't know if you want, we could talk about it. I mean, it was when I saw it.
Of course we want to talk about it, Jeff.
When I found it, it was sitting in a barn. So this is a Marina Blue 66 SS 396 Chevelle, 1971. So the car's only 5 years old. Only 5 years old. The first time I saw it, it was sitting in the barn. The hood was off. The engine was out of the car, laying in the dirt. This is at a farm. So it's in a barn, and there's bird shit all over everything. It's a greasy 396, 4 speeds laying in the dirt.
Oh,
and the hood's propped up against the wall of the barn. And I said, I'll buy it for $850. Can I, he goes, well, you got to, the guy that I was buying it from says, you got to put the motor in the car. Okay. So we came back that weekend with my buddy and all our tools, and we're going to throw this motor in there because he had a A-frame and a come along, right? And so we roll up, and this guy lived on a paved road about 40 miles from my hometown in Iowa. Super guy, really nice guy, John Light. And so we roll up to the driveway, and here's my car sitting in the driveway facing out, and the nose is down, motor's in it, and it's detailed. It's cleaned, it's polished. They didn't have armor all back in 1971, but it looked like a brand new car. Oh, holy crap. So we roll up, and the guy comes out, and he goes, and I think my interpretation of it now, being my age, thinking, I'm sure this is what he was thinking. I'm a couple of young high school kids working in my garage on my car, putting a motor in. If one of these guys gets hurt, it's my responsibility. So he just hired a mechanic from the local Chevy dealership to come out, throw the motor in the car for him, and paid him. So, so this is great. And then I thought, the price just went up.
Yeah, the price just went up.
All I had was $850. I didn't have another nickel. And the guy goes, no. The deal was $850, and I'll stand by it. So can I drive it? It's like, sure. 410 gear, 4-speed, 360 horse, 396. This thing was a terror, man. I mean, it was a 14-second car, but in 1971, for a 17-year-old kid, I was in heaven.
That's more than enough to wrap around a tree when you're.
14 seconds is good to go.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I could ever hook it up, it probably would have run 13, but it was probably a mid to high second car. Because of course you let the clutch out and just spin the radial TAs. That was radial TAs were brand new back then.
How fast did you go through tires?
No, I didn't really abuse it too much but we street raced it a lot. And because in Iowa, all the roads outside of town are absolutely flat and straight for miles and miles and miles. So it was pretty easy to do. And so it was fun.
I'm looking at pictures of a Marina Blue 66 right now.
I had the fastest car in high school for one brief shining moment.
I'm looking at pictures of a Marina Blue 66 right now on Google, Jeff, and it's a beautiful car.
Oh, yeah. So I've just never got rid of the car. I've saved it. I drove it all the way through high school and college, and then drove out here from Iowa, got the job with the magazine, and just drove the wheels off it. It's probably got 250, 300,000 miles on it. Speedometer never worked, so I never knew what kind of miles it had on it. But yeah,
I noticed that you're partial to like the 65, 66, right?
Yes.
Any particular reason? I love the 67. That's my favorite year. It's got the little bit more angular headlights, the sail panels. It's got like the little back window that's kind of rounded.
Yeah.
Why do you like the earlier ones?
Well, it was the 66. I had a friend of mine who was 2 years older than me in high school, and he had a 66 big block Chevelle. And the first time I ever rode in that car, it was like, wow, it's got, because rat motors just stick you back in the seat, and hold you there. And so that was like, my first car was actually a 66 GTO, but it wasn't fast, and the Chevelles were fast. And so it was like, sold the GTO, bought the Chevelle, and this just never got rid of it. It was fun talking with Steve Brule. We were talking about this one time, and he goes, so the first two cars you owned were both big block cars, and yet you're like the king of small blocks. What happened?
Yeah.
I wrote stories for what the readers wanted to read about. And in the 80s, rat motors were expensive. They were expensive to build. So most guys built small blocks. So that's what we'll do,
They
and
still
the
are.
LS came along, we had to do the LS motors, so yeah, same thing.
Definitely. That's cool. So back to your YouTube channel, Jeff. We talked about some of the your favorite engine combos. We talked about your 66 build that you're kind of getting some momentum on.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have planned for your next one?
We've actually shot probably 5 more.
Oh, cool.
So I think Cam right now, the last one we did was a video on, we did the horsepower, the simple horsepower equation. That's one of them that will be coming out soon. And there's also one on how to estimate your ET based on your drag strip mile per hour. Ridiculously simple. I won't give it away. You'll have to watch the video, but it's ridiculously simple. I mean, you can do it with your calculator. So you can sit in the drag strip, watch the guy make a pass, look at his mile per hour, do the simple equation, and know how efficient he is at his ET relative to his mile per hour.
Oh, that's cool.
So stuff like that, and this is actually something I learned from a guy named Jeff Lee, who is an AMX super stock racer. And I did a story on, I think I did it for you, Greg, on my top 5 favorite math equations. And he said, hey, I've got a new one for you. So and he gave it to me, and it was like, man, this thing is A, it's simple, and B, it works. I'll give you a hint. It's all about average acceleration. Now, drag racing is acceleration from a dead stop is not average acceleration, but the math simplifies it, and it makes it work. So
now throw a monkey wrench into all that, and let's talk about front wheel drive drag racing.
Yeah.
and the inefficiencies there, and
right,
all of a sudden none of the numbers make any sense whatsoever because they're all different.
I should go back. We actually entered a front wheel drive car and as an NHRA stock eliminator car in 1981, 81 or 82. NHRA created, that's why you bring this up, I'll just throw this story out here. At the time, I was just a staffer at CarCraft. NHRA came up with X, Y, and Z stock. They don't exist anymore, but they were front wheel drive stock eliminator classes. And at the time, CarCraft had, because I was in charge of it, a front-wheel drive 2.2 liter Chrysler Turismo, which was essentially or not a Chrysler, a Plymouth Turismo versus the Dodge Charger, because they have the little front-wheel drive Dodge Chargers. Remember the 2.2 liter things? And so I had been beating the snot out of this thing for like 6 months. Put a header on it. It was highly illegal. It didn't have a cat on it, or it did have a cat, but it did have a catalytic converter on, but we took the lead down pipes and all that stuff. It had a header on it and a carburetor. Back then, those things were still carbureted, and it was running 1570s, 1560s in the quarter mile, which is not particularly fast at all. And the thing to do was you launch the car, spin the tires about 4 turns, and then let it hook. That way it wouldn't bog the motor. And we were running 1560s, 1570s, because the NHRA index for stock eliminator for Y stock, with this car fell into, was 1680.
So you were a second ahead of the index right out of the gate.
Instantly, we were a second under the index. So I called Chrysler. I said, the Chrysler West Coast PR guy, can we enter this at the Winter Nationals? He went, sure. Well, then this ties Cam back into the story. So the next phone call he made was to Popular Hot Rodding, because I was at CarCraft. These separate publishing companies. They were our competition. He called Popular Hot Rodding and said, I'll give you a Dodge Charger. You have about a month before the Winter Nationals. Turn this into a race car. So I'm gonna tell a story on these guys now. Okay. It was Pete Pasteur, who has since passed away, but Pete Pasteur was the editor. Cam Benty was on staff. And so Chrysler gave them a Dodge Charger. They took it over to Valley Head Service over here in the Valley. They milled like 80 thousandths off the head and jumped the compression up about a full point, right? And Cam told me this later. I didn't know that any of this until after the fact, but they milled the snot out of the head, put it all back together. I'd never taken my head off. All I did was jet the carburetor for the header. That's all I did. And then checked. I don't even think I checked the cam timing. I was going to, but never got around to it. And there was some Chrysler was going to create some, because they really pushed those little 2.2 liter motors, and they were durable as hell. You could beat the snot. I used to rev that thing to 7,000 bone stock. And so anyway, so we show up for the Winter Nationals. Their PHR's only goal was to out qualify me, be faster than me. And they were like 3/10 quicker than I was. So we get to the Winter Nationals, 1980, pretty sure this was 1982. They're number 1 qualifier, and I'm number 2 qualifier with front-wheel drive cars. And the entire stock eliminator field wants to hang us in effigy. Nobody's happy with us. Nobody. And it was all, if you think about it, building a stock eliminator car it's a study in frustration, because they've pushed these cars so hard. You have to cheat like crazy to make these things run good. And here we are, we fall out of a tree. We're number 1, number 2 qualifier. So they purposely, because, well, I'm going to tell a story. So first round happens, they lose first round. I fully expected to be first round fodder. I won first round. I don't know how, but I did. Because I'm running because in essence, if you're running under your index, you then have to call out it essentially becomes a bracket race. So I called out 1570. I ran a 1571 at 79 miles an hour, whatever the hell it was. And I beat the guy, because I think he broke out. Because if you think about it, I'm racing, I think first round was up against an F stock automatic, like a 289 Fairlane, something like that. Well, I get like a 7-second head start, right? It's not that 5-second head start, 6 seconds, whatever it is. I'm 3/8 of a mile before his green light comes on. So he's just blowing by me at about 80 miles an hour faster than I am, and he breaks out. So I win first round. So we pull in at the top end of the track. I'd never done this before. I'd never run stock eliminator before. They said, the girl at the ticket booth says, you won first round, go park your car over there. So I park over there, I get out, And I'd met these stock eliminator racers the weekend before. Chuck Winchester was his name, I think. Chuck Winchester and something. Anyway, they were on a stock eliminator Camaro. So I parked next to them, and they said, "Oh, you won first round," because they'd seen me the weekend before at a race down in Orange County. We were testing the car, and so I said, "So how's this work?" And they go, "Well, they're going to come through here, and they're going to tag the people that are going to the teardown bar, and this is Saturday, so they can tear you down to make sure you're legal, and then second round starts on Sunday morning." I said, "Okay, so what are the criterion for teardown?" "Oh, that's easy. There are 3." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Number 1, if they've never seen you before." It's like, okay, they've never seen me before. So number 2, if you run way under your index. Yeah, he says, "You're number 2 qualifier. Guess what?" And I said, "What's number 3?" He goes, "Oh, if you're a magazine guy."
Oh, so
I said,
you knew you were getting a text.
They're going to tear me down? He goes, "I guarantee it." So they come by. None of the NHRA tech people had ever seen a front wheel drive car before, right? In racing. So they take this, it's like a wax material from the head bolts. So they know that between there and the teardown barn, you're not going to swap parts out. So they tagged every bolt on the engine, So we're the first car into the teardown barn. And the first thing they want to look is your carburetor. And then they come through and they say, "Okay, everybody is going to pull a cylinder head." Well, in my case, it was the cylinder head. And I'd never had the head off of this thing. Well, the PHR guys said, "Look, hey, we'll help you." So Cam and Pistera were there. I have photos of the 3 of us on a bench working on pulling the cylinder head off my engine. And so we pull the cylinder head off. Again, I've never had this head off before. And so I took it over to the bench, and we pop the spring off it, and the guy pulls the intake valve out, and he starts laughing hysterically. And so literally, this is no kidding. It's just a series of wooden workbenches, right? And there's like probably 20, 25 cars in the barn from all these different guys that have won first round that are being torn down. And he stands up on the workbench and holds my intake valve up, because it turns out there's this clump of carbon at the base of the intake valve that's almost the same size as the intake valve. And when he stops laughing, he stands up on the bench and yells out, "Gentlemen, I want you to take a look at the intake valve out of your number 2 qualifier engine." Everybody already knows, they hate me. And now they really hate me, right? So he gets down on the bench. He says, "You want me to knock this carbon off?" I go, "No, man, that's what makes it go fast. Leave it in there." So we put it all back together. Everyone else is gone. We're still in there. John Bechtel is helping me. We cannot make it run right. It'll run, but it's like it's like it's lost half its horsepower. I was like, "Oh, crap." Well, I don't have a trailer and a truck. We drove it to the track, which was the whole other adventure. For 4 days straight at the Winter Nationals, the guard stopped me, says, "You can't bring this thing in here. It's my race car. I was here yesterday. Don't you remember? You can't bring this thing." I mean, talk about drones. Anyway, so we get to the track. We're trying to figure it out. This is what I learned about rotor phasing and how critical rotor phasing is. So on a 2.2 liter Chrysler, got a belt that runs the camshaft off the crankshaft. And off to the side is an idler pulley. And the idler pulley does 2 things. It puts tension on the belt, and then it also runs the accessory drive turns out for the oil pump. It also spins the distributor. Well, we phased the camshaft to the crankshaft. We checked it like 19 times, couldn't figure out why it wouldn't run right. Finally dawned on us that there's one line in we had the instruction manual out, the factory repair manual on our race car, trying to figure out why it won't run right. And it finally dawns on there's one line there that says, "Oh, well, you got to make sure that the idler pulley is phased, because that phases your rotor." So what happened was the rotor was in between the 2 points. Rather than being here or here, it was here. And we ran at the track that way. They give you a test run. I lost 1.5 seconds. I think it was a pig. It wouldn't get out of its own way. We finally figured it out right before second round call. We figured it out. And so anyway, I raced a C-stock automatic 428 Super Cobra Jet Mustang in the second round. That guy went by me at least 100 miles an hour faster than I was going. I thought my car was going to spin out. He went by me so fast, and I lost second round. So that's my front wheel drive story. My drag race.
That's hilarious.
That's
what
awesome.
year was that Charger, Jeff?
I had 19. It was 81 Turismo. Popular Hot Rodding had the Charger, and I think this was probably 1982. I think. So we got a picture. I've got a picture of my car in National Dragster. They called it the little front wheel drive killer car because it was number 2. We were both 1 and 2 qualifiers.
Wait, it was an Omni?
No, it was a Turismo.
Oh, it was a Charger Turismo.
Yeah.
Or no, it was a Plymouth Turismo.
Plymouth Turismo, yeah, and the Dodge Charger was the other one. Yeah, fun stuff. Beat the snot out of that car. Absolutely beat that, and you never broke anything. No half
Slow
shaft.
car drag racing is fun. Like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, except on the top end, because I remember last time I was at Streetcar Super Nationals, I was running the bone stock Mustang, and I think I was trapping it like 78 miles an hour. Like, it wasn't doing much because it was in Vegas. But I raced some gas car. I think it was A-Gas, but he was running like 820s at 170.
Yeah, so he's literally going 100 miles an hour faster than you are.
And everybody wonders why in my 15-second car I've got full fire gear on. But oh my God, I mean, 100 miles an hour doesn't sound like a lot until it's actually happening to you at the stripe. I mean, but other than that, I love my slow car drag racing because you mess with everybody.
Yeah,
like
when we ran the weekend before at Orange. This is when Orange County was still open, obviously, and it was a super stock show at Orange County the weekend before. And I was racing those guys with a Camaro, and they told me later, they said it was at night, and he said, by the time our green light came on, I thought you had taken the stripe and turned off the drag strip. That's how far out there you were. And he beat me because I was late on the light, and he just went blowing by me. But it was still a lot of fun. But yeah.
I'm looking at these, and I don't hate them.
It was a front-wheel drive in CarCraft magazine. It was not a popular deal, but we had some fun with that car. We beat the snot out of it. Yeah. So
sounds like it, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. Back to your YouTube channel, Jeff.
Back to the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So we've got like probably 5 more videos that we're doing. And I got to let the viewers decide, well, which way do you want this to go? Are the simpler things more what you're looking for, or is it the real, let's dive deep down into the rabbit hole and look at some of this stuff? It's kind of fun. More than likely, it'll probably be a balance between the two. Are
they going to be? I mean, the name implies, right? Jeff Smith's Garage. Are we going to see Jeff Smith take any field trips, maybe to West Tech or anywhere else?
We've talked about it. Yeah. We're also starting something. We've done a test thing on it yet. We're going to start a podcast, a video podcast, and it's going to be Cam and Steve Strope and I. It's still going to be just Garage, but it's and that's where we're going to go to different places and do things and have some fun. So
very cool. Yeah,
we did a test one here a week ago, and it collapsed into chaos. Because it went went that way for a little while, then came back, and then went again. And so we got to kind of narrow it down. We'd like to do it as a magazine format kind of thing, where we have like certain topics or certain subjects, not subjects, but categories that we cover. So a tech piece here, do this, do that. But right now it's open to do whatever people want us to do. So
I think you guys can't go wrong. You guys just need to put that content out there, man. We went out to Steve Strope's place in not Camarillo.
It's Simi Valley.
Simi Valley, thank you. Yeah. And we shot an episode there, and that was like one of the best episodes we've done. I mean, Steve's such a great guy. People loved it.
Really talented, and he's very good at those little details that really identify a car. It's like he's got a 64 F85. I used to have one, and he built a really pretty one. It made my car look like a dump truck, but
He's got such a cool like mind for it, you know, like you said that exactly, that detail, like he builds a whole story around a car, like in his head, like a backstory, and then it's cool.
In fact, one of the engines I just finished up is a big block. He's building a 67 C10 truck for Bob Florine, the general manager at ARP. And the story, because it has to have a story, is this is 1967. What would the Corvette engineers do? What kind of truck would they build if they needed a chase truck for Chevrolet, for Corvette engineering? Well, they would build a 67 short bed C10 with a 427 L89 tri-power big block, a rock pressure 4-speed, and independent rear suspension. So Bob and Steve came to me and said, we want you to build the engine. And externally, it looks like a stone stock L89 tri-power, which is aluminum heads and a tri-power setup with a triangulated air cleaner assembly and everything. And but internally, I could do whatever I wanted. So in the big block, package that I did on my, favorite combinations is that camshaft, which is quickly becoming my favorite big block camshaft. Although that could change now because of the stuff that Billy's doing with the low shock technology. There's a whole family of camshaft lobes. So he just threw out, they have like a 3-letter designation. So LGG or LGP or something like that. There's all these different ones, MGZ, and there's these different lobes. And some of these are precursors to the LST stuff. So now I want to build a rat motor. I've got one that I may put a much milder camshaft in, but go with one of those camshafts because, and there's like tiers to how aggressive you want it to be for the same duration. He'll give you another 40, 50, 60 thousandths of lobe lift. It's like, man, wow, this could be fun, So relatively short duration camshaft with a lot of lift, big blocks like that. So
how cool.
There's all kinds of stuff that we can do, So
that,
how far
for Bob, isn't that, didn't we talk about that a while back? Kind of like the factory appearing stock tire type stuff.
Yes, exactly. That's where it would fit into really nicely, where, because this is I put a stroker crank in it, and because they're stock closed chambered heads, I had to run closed chambered pistons, and then the heads had been, think about these. These were built in 1967. These were cast in 1967. So we got to looking at them, and one chamber had obviously been repaired. Whoever did it did a spectacular job. You could almost not tell. But they milled the snot out of these heads. So I went to bolt them on. Well, the intake manifolds wouldn't fit. So I had to take 40 thousandths off the intake manifold to make it fit, which meant going to the machine shop, milling it, bring it back, check it, not still going to fit, go back, mill it again, come back, check it again, and keep milling it until it fits. And then, well, does the distributor now, does it bottom out? Well, no, it doesn't. So, okay, we're good there. I had to have the bottoms, I would cut the bottom of the China wall area because it was hitting the China wall of the block and holding the manifold off the head. Oh, it was a lot of work putting this thing together. So because they had taken 40 thousandths, we did the math on it, because you get about 6 thousandths of cut off the head is worth 1 cc. Well, these heads had been cut 7 cc's. Wow. So that's 42 thousandths. So it's like, yikes, so a lot of things didn't fit as a result. So it's just part of the drill for putting the motor together, but it's all done. Now it's ready to go over to Stropes and
where are they at with the C10? Do you know?
They're working on it. I haven't been over there in a while. The last time I was there, it wasn't there. So I think it's at the body shop, getting either body work and or paint. And then, so motor's done. He's got a rock crusher 4-speed for it. I told him, I said, you're probably not going to be happy with that. He goes, why? I said, because they're noisy, because they changed the angle of the gear set. And I've driven a rock crusher car before, and they are ridiculously noisy in the first 3 gears because of the pattern. They're stronger. That's why they did it, but they're not
just the way they cut those gears.
Yeah, they're not quiet. So, but complete IRS in this thing with Corvette, 15 by, let's see, 1967. That probably would have been like 15.6 rally wheels. He may go
I can't wait.
15 8, you know, just to make it look better. But
no, that's going to be rad.
yeah, it should be a cool deal.
The detail he puts in those things is cool. It's all the little touches that I like about his builds.
Yeah.
If you know, you know.
Walk over to him and had him paint it, and then it was so nice. That's why my engine for my chassis is not here. I took my engine over there and said, "Well, you paint my engine look like that because it looks really good." You know,
that's awesome.
My cheese ball spray can stuff doesn't look as good as what he can do. So,
well,
these guys
Jeff,
are pros, and you know, I'm dangerous with a spray gun. So,
hey man,
speaking of painting engines, I need to talk to you off camera because I've got some fun ideas that I want to run by you. And
okay,
but yeah,
we could talk about it right now, Greg. What?
No.
Oh, is this for the LS 5.0?
Well, of course it is. Like, of course
okay. Well, it could have been about your small block Ford.
Well, that's just that thing's just gonna get a rattle can blue paint job. That's just what it's gonna get. But
and it's lucky to have it.
Yeah, right.
But hey, Jeff, I want to thank you for coming on again, man. And I want to send everybody over to Jeff Smith's Garage on YouTube. Check that out. And go
subscribe, ring the bell, do all that good stuff, and we're going to try and grow this thing a little bit, and then hopefully we can find some sponsors for it. So because right now we put all this effort into it, and it's not paying off at all, but it's a labor of love right now, and it's something we wanted to do, and if we can get a couple of people to follow along and get the numbers up, then it'll start returning a little, and it makes it worthwhile. We get any kind of response to it at all, and it's kind of fun to watch the numbers grow. So
definitely, yeah. Greg and I, we just got our first 2 sponsors for the RodCAST as well. Actually, we were talking about Bob Florine and over at ARP, and they just came on. Shout out to ARP. We appreciate it. But yeah, man,
and a really good product too. In fact, it was one quick story about that. We were talking, and I said, so externally, this engine has to look like, because these are all date coded. I mean, that's a date coded block. Heads, intake manifold, tri-power carburetors, all this stuff is proper date codes. And he spent a lot of money on that. And I said, so let's fast forward here a little bit. And we put this together totally stock looking. And you've got this motor in the truck, and the truck's at a show. And some wise ass comes up and looks at you and says, you're the general manager of ARP. How come that engine has stock head bolts on it? If you're the manager, excuse me. Why wouldn't you have your own bolts on it? And Bob said, I never even thought about that. I said, well, I have, because I don't want to go back and change these out, and quite frankly, I'm deathly afraid that I'm going to torque these head bolts down on with using original bolts in an original block. I know what's going to happen. We're going to pull the threads out because the thread engagement's not very good. ARP bolts, the thread engagement's really good. You generally won't pull any threads out. So I said, I want to use your stuff. And he goes, well, okay, let's use it. So that's, so it will have it. That's the only part of it that won't be period correct, but there's a reason for that.
Yeah, but I don't think we have any projects that don't have ARP stuff on them.
Oh, I won't.
Why would you?
I won't put an engine together without ARP fasteners, just because I don't want to mess around with just old used bolts. I mean, it's just, why would you do that? Well, the only thing I can think of that I will do is if we ever restore my Z28 motor, it will have to have stock head bolts and stock intake manifold bolts because it's a pure resto, and I'll be hating it because
maybe there's a market for ARP to do like real low run, like period correct.
That's a great idea.
I don't know what the actual like economics of that are, because I don't know their business model, but I know from an enthusiast standpoint they can do it. Sure. Let's do it, guys.
Yeah.
I don't care if it costs $400,000 to tool up for and you're only going to make 20 grand back. I like it, so let's do it.
Let's do it.
I've been trying to get over to their facility to see how all their stuff is made, because I hear it's really
cool. Amazing place, and what you'll notice is how clean the place is. I mean, this is an industrial shop, and yet literally the floor is, everybody says, oh, you can eat off. It's like, well, I think you probably could. It's
5-second rule gets extended to the 10-second rule there.
Yes. Yeah. And it's incredibly clean, and they make such a great product. And and they test everything, and it's done.
That's
right.
what I'm really interested in seeing, like testing the tensile strength of those bolts, and like they do some tests where they stretch them until they snap, right?
They break. Yeah, it's fun to watch. They go bang, and they break it apart. Yeah, cool. Because you watch a bolt literally look like it's a piece of taffy, because it stretches and it pulls down in like an hourglass shape, and all of a sudden it snaps.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. And we, as an aside, I wanted to do a story on hardware bolts, how bad they will probably be. And he goes, "Well, we've already done that test. Don't bother. They're actually far better than you think they are." And so it's like, wow, okay. So a grade 8 bolt that I buy at the hardware store is a real grade 8 bolt. He goes, "Well, at least the ones that we tested were." So, because they had the same thought, these cheese ball stuff. What is this?
Yeah.
Now,
well, there is like fake or like a counterfeit ARP hardware out there.
Oh yeah. They actually contacted me about being an expert witness for them in a trial. They had taken this guy to court because he was selling counterfeit ARP bolts, and was meeting with the attorneys. And so I sat down with them, and my job was to establish the impact on just not on them, but the whole industry, and why counterfeiting is bad. And the bolts were junk. They were one grade above styrofoam, but they showed me two boxes, and one of them was counterfeit and the other one was not. And I've got I've dozens and dozens of ARP boxes, so I thought, oh, I'll be able to tell the difference. And I studied it for probably 5-6 minutes, and finally said, I don't know, I give up. And the only difference was, I probably shouldn't say this, but what they did was they took a box, spread it all apart, scanned it, and so it was perfect. But the little white part number label, ARP, rounds the corners of the label, and the counterfeit was square. That's like otherwise you could not tell the difference. Now the bolts on the inside were not ARP bolts. They were made out of styrofoam.
12-point pieces of crap.
Yeah, they were terrible. Yeah.
Man.
So,
well, shout out to the real ARP.
That's a whole other topic that would be a great topic for a RodCAST. Would be, the effect of counterfeiting stuff. It's really bad.
Well, it's terrifying. I mean, the thought that, because think about it. Everybody loves going to Amazon, right?
Yep.
And to think, there's third-party sellers on Amazon, and most people don't even realize that.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
and
I'm getting this great
idea where
deal
that's from.
Yeah, and it's like, it's terrifying.
Yeah. So imagine buying brake pads off of Amazon. It's like, nope.
No.
Not gonna do it.
No thanks.
Not gonna do it. Because you just don't know.
Yeah, that's scary to think about. And that's actually a really good topic. You're right. Maybe we have to reach out to Bob and see if we can get him on here.
That'd be
cool. Or any manufacturer. I know, like Doug Norton was telling me that Global West was telling me, this is several years ago, that there's probably more than one person out there knocking off his upper control arms, the two upper control arms. And he stopped making. He had these little die cut decals, and he would stick them on his deal, and they just reproduced his decal, and then were passing these off as Global West upper control arms, and they were made out of muffler tubing, and the ball joints were terrible. They were on paper mache, and people would call Doug up and say, or come to his shop and go, "This is junk. I want a new one. What the hell?" And he would look at, he'd see him walk in the door, and he'd go, "That's not mine." He said, "You bought that off Amazon, didn't you?" "Well, yeah." It's like, "That's not mine. You bought a counterfeit. I can't help you. I mean, I can help you. I will sell you the real deal, but I feel sorry for you because you spent a lot of money, and hopefully you didn't crash your car when this thing failed. But bad deal."
Yeah, counterfeits hurt everybody.
It's been rampant for a long time. I mean, for someone who has the means, like to, copy a design for like something as simple as an intake manifold, like sure they could do it and you'll save like $100 or something, but the production is just so much more inferior. The castings and
you fast forward to the illogical conclusion to all this, or the logical conclusion to it is that you know, some company like Edelbrock or Dart or Holley does the engineering work, and then somebody else just buys it, rips it off, sends it to China, duplicate this, make it without the Holley logo on it, and I'll sell it for $100 less. Well,
Exactly.
what's the motivation for these other companies to finally just go, there's no reason for us to develop any parts, you're just going to rip us off.
Exactly.
And so that's why that whole Made in America thing is important, because you know, otherwise we could be facing, it's not going to happen next week or next year, not even probably in 5 years, but 10, 20, 30 years, it could be, there are going to be no parts, because no one's going to bother to research and build it, you know, and incur all that cost, because somebody else is just going to rip you off. You know,
Exactly.
2 minutes after you've debuted your product, they've already got a duplicate of it, and they're ramping up production.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just car parts and stuff. I was watching How It's Made last night, right? And this real high-end Italian pasta maker, like, was on. I want to know how much it was, because I was like, this is amazing. I start Googling, and all their stuff is like price on request, stuff like that. But when I'm Googling, all of a sudden, AliExpress pops up with it.
Yeah.
They're knocking off pasta makers. I mean, it's like
everything, man.
Yeah. And it blows me away. And you might think, oh, well, okay, so you could save a couple grand on a high-end pasta maker. You know, what's the danger in that?
Right.
I'm not trusting my food. You know,
I want to just buy something once, man. And, you know, but that's why, you know, these name brands are important, you know, like Holley and Edelbrock. And
I get it. It caught, you know, Global West parts are more expensive. I get it. But you're getting something that is ridiculously over-engineered, and he's tested it. He knows it's never going to break. And if it does, for whatever reason, break, he'll stand behind it. You know, these other places, they're going to forget who you are 30 seconds after you bought the product, you know? Yeah. And, you know, when
it doesn't fit or it fails, you're on your own.
You're on your own.
Yeah,
so
they say you're paying for a name, but what you're really paying for is what's behind that name.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And it's no different than you know, hiring a professional to do a job that you watch them. And classic example of that was my wife. We redid her garage in the house, and she says, I can mud this and tape and mud this myself. I went, no, you can't. It looks easy. You watched a couple of YouTube videos, and it's really easy. Okay. She spent 3 weekends trying to make it work, and finally gave up. We hired a guy. He came in. He did it in 4 hours. Mudded it, taped it, and mudded it, and it looked spectacular. And she goes, I just don't get it. I said, well, this is what this guy does every day. And he's very, very, if you did this one thing, or, you know, whatever it is, every day, you'd get good at it too. And that's why you pay him for his expertise, as much for the fact that he turned the wrench. You know, you hire a plumber to come out, and he knows the trick, right? That you don't know. You'll spend 6 weeks trying to fix this thing. He can fix it in 4 hours. And it's like, you're paying for his experience, you know, and he didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. He's been doing this for 20 years, and he's learned those techniques, but he's learned them the hard way, you know? It's like, you know, a lot of these tech tips that I come up with was they're all, a lot of them are, sometimes I even throw the line in there, ask us how we know this, you know? And it's because we've stepped on that landmine. It blew my foot off. And now you know, just warning other people, don't walk in the landmine, you know, don't step on that landmine. So,
yeah. And I mean,
and you know,
back to the drywall, there's what's more expensive than poorly done drywall. Like, I did my drywall myself. I saved a bunch of money. You know what isn't saving me money? Having to buy toolboxes to hide all the seams.
Right. You know, and so you just have to bite the bullet. But you know, it's like everything else. It seems like such a painful thing to have to do that, to pay that money, but then you realize it's done professionally. You're happy. You walk in every day and you look at it. I paid guys to mud this drywall. I wasn't going to do it myself, and it looks okay. It looks good. You know, I'm happy with it. But if I did it, it would talk to me every time I walked in there. You know, and I know better than to cheap out on my wife's garage, because I'll hear about it. So not doing that, Well, I can do this. Like, let's just pay the pro, and we'll pay him the money, and we'll be happy. And long since forgot how much it costs. It's not important because he did it. It looks spectacular. She's thrilled. It's a win. So same thing with working.
There you guys go.
Sometimes you have to pay somebody else to do the job, and it hurts because, like, especially if you've done it, there's certain things I just won't do. Painting is one of them. I just not even, because I'm deadly with a paint gun. So it's like I know better than that. So stay away from it. So
more life hacks, tech tips, and all can be had at Jeff Smith's Garage on YouTube. Go hit that like, comment, and subscribe button, you guys, and get better at life with Jeff Smith.
Yeah. Just happy. At the end of the day, Harry Chapin has this saying that his grandfather told him. He says there's two types of tired. At the end of the day, you go in and sometimes at the end of the day you're hot. And you won, but you fought other people's battles. You fought other people's goals, and you just don't rest easy. And then there's other days where you lost, where nothing worked. It's just a complete frustrating deal. But they were your battles, your fights, and your goals to try and make. And at the end of the day, you rest easy because you fought your battles rather than somebody else's. So there's that side of it. If at the end of the day you're happy with the result and you got there and you fought the battle the right way, then it's okay and you sleep well. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Little tech tip from that late Harry Chapin.
Yeah, I gotta meditate on that one a little bit. That's good stuff. But Jeff, as always, we appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I know that we're gonna talk off camera about Greg's secret project that he doesn't want to reveal to us yet. But as always, thank you. You're always welcome. Anytime you want to come back and tell us what you're working on, we would love to have you, man.
Sounds good.
All right. With that, peace out.